Joining us now is recognized one of the best pollsters in the whole world is Scott Rasmussen. You can always learn more by going to scottrasmussen.com. That's scottrasmussen.com, and he's with us today. Always love having him on. Scott, welcome.
Great to be with you, John.
Scott, I love your polling because it's not the normal stuff that you get every day. It gives you more of an insight into a lot of things politically, what Americans are thinking. One poll that you just had, 22% of American adults are either small business owners or have at some point owned a small business in their life. This survey you did found that another 20% would like to own a small business at some point in the future. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, small business, obviously a very important part of American culture and drives our economy. And it's something that overall 42% either say they already have done or would like to do at some point in their life. What we find, not surprisingly, people who are a little bit older, senior citizens, if they haven't started a small business by now, not likely to happen. But among younger adults who have not run a small business, half, 48%, say they want to do so. Minorities are more likely than white Americans to say at this point that they would like to own a business. This is the drive. This is part of what has made America, and it's a desire to serve your community and to serve others by opening a business that meets their needs.
So, but in reality, you really don't even think about opening up a small business if the economy is not performing well, right? I mean, you think about keeping your job, not about putting your capital at risk or putting your job at risk, or having to make money without it being guaranteed through a paycheck every 2 weeks, right?
That's for the most part, sure. When you have a thriving economy and you see openings and there's opportunities, that's when you open the doors and take that risk. You know, it's really funny. Many years ago, I did some work with people who ran very large corporations, and they thought that running a small business was just something you did when you were between jobs at a big corporation. You know, you lost your job, right, so you started a business. They totally misunderstood the everything about being a small business owner. And you're right, in a thriving economy, the opportunities are there, and people will take that risk. And again, in a thriving economy, you see the openings. You see what people are looking for.
I remember as a young man somebody telling me when I was a corporate executive back in the day when we were climbing the corporate ladder to nowhere. I remember somebody telling me, one of the executives in my company, that people that buy into franchises, right? Remember the big when franchises were just becoming big, that he said people that invest in a franchise can't hold a job in corporate America. I actually remember the guy saying that to me, and boy, how off they were back then, because so many people that have gone into franchising and opened up a store, whether it be UPS or Burger King, Subway sandwich, whatever it may be, many of them now have made millions of dollars off it, and they're highly successful. But that was kind of the mindset back then.
Yeah, and look, let's be clear about it. Most people who have a small business work longer hours. This is not something that is done for most people to get very rich. It is a way, again, to be engaged, but also to provide for your family. It is something that it is being self-sufficient. It has lots of rewards. And it's not all about, gee, I want to come up with an idea and be a millionaire tomorrow. I don't want to flip and have an IPO and do something else. For most people, their business starts small, remains small, and it's an ongoing part of their life, and it's a very enriching part of their life.
Well, I'm a small business owner, so you're talking to one right now, and I couldn't imagine. I just couldn't imagine doing anything else. Those days, I often think back of when I was in corporate America, and some of how it's very different. The whole thing is very different than what you do now.
Right.
The dynamics are different. The day is different. The priorities are different. I mean, I remember back in the day, I was with a big firm at the time, and I was the senior vice president. And at least a third of my day, every day, was spent with corporate politics. And you had to do that in order to survive. At least a third of every single day. Think about the wasted effort. Now, I don't do any of that because it's just me and our staff. Scott, daily presidential tracking poll approval rating 47% for the president. That's pretty good news. Higher than Obama was at this time. What do you make of this?
Well, it's essentially the same as where Obama was at this time, and I think the most remarkable thing to me about the president's numbers right now is that since the shutdown ended in late January, for the last 3+ months, every single day that we have updated this, the president's numbers have been within 2 points of 46%. That's incredibly stable. And you think about all that's going on with the Mueller report and different investigations and all kinds of things, and the only way you can rationalize this to make sense of it is to recognize that all that discussion in Washington must just be being ignored because it's having no impact on anything that we're seeing. Now, something else that's going on in the last few months, the economy appears to be gaining steam. We're at a place where last fall, heading into the elections, people were feeling pretty good about the economy. Confidence fell a little bit after the Democrats won control of the House, maybe a little uncertainty there. Confidence fell pretty sharply when the shutdown took place. But ever since then, we've had some good economic news. Confidence has returned, and it appears to be growing. Right now, there are twice as many people who say the economy is getting better compared to those who say it's getting worse.
Explain that, Paul. That's finally when you look at the economy and the numbers that you've got on that. Remember, we started with 42% of people in America either have owned a small business or would like to. That, as I said, is a function of a strong economy because you think, well, if things are going well and I own a small business, I can be my own boss and I can also make money on it. Now, you've also got a poll saying that Republicans have opened the biggest lead on trust in the economy. Scott Rasmussen, can you elaborate on that?
Yes, we do a poll every month asking people who they trust on a variety of issues. And for the last 9 months, for the most part, Republicans have always had the edge, but it's generally been fairly modest, 3 or 4 points. Right now, 37% of voters nationwide say that they trust Republicans more than Democrats when it comes to the economy. Just 26% trust the Democrats. That 11-point gap, very significant. Democrats have a big lead on health care, Republicans on national security, but the shift in the economic perceptions, pretty striking. And if it continues, and we see this over a sustained period of time, then I suspect you will see some improvement in the president's job approval ratings. You'll start to see some improvements in the generic congressional ballot for Republicans. But look, it's not just about people. This is not a case of people sitting down and analyzing policies. It's a sense of what's going on around them. You know, we do our weekly poll with the Job Creators Network. Right now, 55% of Americans say the economy is good or excellent. Just 12% say it's poor. When you get to personal finances, 51% say good or excellent. Very few people are saying their own finances are in poor shape. People are feeling and seeing this economy all around them. They see that people are hiring new workers in the community that they live in. And so this experience of a strong economy is what is giving the Republicans some advantage now on this issue.
You're on the John Fredericks Network. We are with Scott Rasmussen. You can follow Scott at his website at scottrasmussen.com, scottrasmussen.com. He's got his finger on the pulse of America. Scott, let's get to what you just said, breaking down the economic numbers and the way people are feeling about this economy and their personal finances, all positive. As a pollster, how do you analyze or reconcile that with this growing number of Americans, and especially young people, that have a favorable view of socialism and would like to see the U.S. go that route? How do these two reconcile, Scott Rasmussen?
Well, the most important thing to recognize there is most people in America today who say they like socialism don't think it means anything like what historic socialism has meant. In fact, most do not believe it has anything to do with economics. The most stunning number that I tell people on this socialism phase we're going through right now is that 8 out of 10 people who say they like socialism also like free markets. there is a belief that socialism, as people understand it today, will not lead to higher taxes and a more powerful government. And so I think there's a disconnect. When a politician in Washington hears that support for socialism is growing, what they're picturing is, people love what Bernie Sanders is saying or what AOC is saying. Not the case at all. In fact, they just simply don't view it as an economic system.
So how do they view it?
I'm still, what I've found has been so shocking. I'm still trying to work through exactly what it does have what it does mean. But I think it is something with decision-making closer to home, a distrust of large power of any type. I'll tell you one funny thing that, I went and asked some dictionary definitions of what socialism means. And even people who say, that society should own the means of production, say, they don't think that should be the government. They think it should be local groups as opposed to a government agency. So there's a different perspective there. But as I was going through this, my wife suggested that I should throw a summary line from my book into the test. And, I wrote a book and it talks about free markets and civil society and community problem solving and the fact that if we want America to work, we need an all-hands-on-board approach. We need small businesses, and we need churches, and we need community groups, and we need our local governments, and we need all sorts of people working together. And a majority of people who say they like socialism said that my book was a good definition of socialism. And, so I just never knew I was a socialist.
Let's. I've only got a couple more minutes, Scott.
Yeah.
It's always fascinating to have you on, but I just want to go over a couple other cool polls that you have. One that came out, you've got 54% say American society is fair and decent. 46% say it's unfair and discriminatory. Would you expand on that?
Yeah, this is something, people get focused on particular issues. Do you like this health care plan or that health care plan? One of the things that I like to do is dig a little deeper beneath the surface and find out what people are thinking. If you believe society is generally fair and decent, you are probably likely to see a role for government that is smoothing off the rough edges, supporting something that is already in place that's in pretty good shape. If you see society as fundamentally unfair and discriminatory, many people who hold that view are much more open to a larger government role for recreating society in a better manner. And so what you find is there's some pretty healthy divides in terms of who thinks fair and decent and who takes the opposite view. 84% of Republicans say, yeah, society's pretty good. This is society as opposed to government or politics. 68% of Democrats see the opposite. Independent voters are split right down the middle.
Going into 2020, what does that mean?
I think it means that we're going to have a debate about how do you create a society that works. The goal is never to create the perfect government program. The goal is never to create a government that works. It is society that works. And so as you're talking about 2020, how do we create a fair society? Are there some things, because that's what people want. People want to be treated fairly. They want the chance to go out. If you want to start a small business, you want to have a fair shot. If you want to take part in your community, you want a fair chance to participate. And so I think, finding ways to see things in society that are perceived as unfair, finding a way to address them in some sense that is consistent with American values is a great thing. Actually, I've got a great poll coming out later today that makes this point. Why is Social Security so wildly popular in a time when people are very distrustful of government? It's because nearly 8 out of 10 Americans do not see it as a government program. They perceive that it is something that they have paid into during their lifetime, and they're simply getting their money back when they retire. Now, the finances aren't working all that well on it, and there's issues with that. But that was sold, that's the way it was sold to the American people, and that is perceived as a fair system as opposed to simply receiving a check from the government.
That's fascinating. For our listeners out there, as we get into the more politics and the mood of America, you really have to tag a website, scottrasmussen.com. scottrasmussen.com is fascinating information on it. Also, Scott does a column. Scott, it seems to me, about 3 times a week you do a column?
I write several columns, and I do a syndicated column once a week, but we put new things out on the site every day, including analysis, and we track the president's job approval daily, the generic ballot daily. We have a number of other things we track on a weekly or monthly basis. And, and then we also get into the really important things in life, like 63% of Americans who have seen the Avengers movie say they're going to go watch it again.
I know, and then in just a minute that we have with the Avengers movie, which I haven't seen it yet, but my son's birthday is 15 is today, so that's one of the things we're going to do this weekend. And let me just tell you, Scott's poll, I mean, he not only does the politics stuff, but he does the stuff that really matters. And he says that according to his poll, Iron Man is the favorite Avenger, capturing a whopping 21%, beating out my favorite, Captain America, second at 17%. So I would have voted for Captain America. Even though I didn't see the film, he's still my favorite. So I'm very loyal to that. But 21% like Iron Man.
Yeah, they are the 2 stars of the franchise, right. And their tension does keep people interested. And, by the way, Thor is in 3rd place. So.
All right, John Fredericks Radio Network, Thor in 3rd place. Scott Rasmussen, thanks for being with us. I really appreciate it. Scott, you can learn more. Go to scottrasmussen.com, scottrasmussen.com, and follow him there. And remember, in the 2020 election, in the 2016 election, Scott Rasmussen had the most accurate polling there.